Hello, hello, and welcome again. Aldsidu. Ald meaning old, Sidu meaning customs. This channel is about the old ways and a reconstruction of the old ways for today. Aldsidu is the old Saxon word that means old customs. Today's video is called as the Kindred Model, a flawed heathen church model. Now, modern Asatru, also sometimes Reconstructionist, various branches, organizations under the neo-pagan umbrella, they have a kindred model. And the purpose of this video or article is to examine if the kindred model is influenced by the church, synagogue, mosque, monotheistic model, or if modern kindreds are something that modern heathenry is made up, or is the model derived from research on historical heathenry as found in the historical sources? Now, I believe in clan and family-based heathenry first and foremost. Absolutely. We live in a Christian world today. If you're European or American, lots of Europeans came over and founded America. America is part of the Christian West. Europe is part of the Christian West today. We must decolonize ourselves. We were born in a Christian world. We have Christian mindsets. Even though the world is more secular than it's ever been, it is still a very Christianized world that we live in. And if we are going to try to go back 1,200 years, 1,100 years ago, 1,000 years ago into pre-Christian heathen times, we must gain that worldview. And let's give ourselves a clean slate. Let's erase our minds. Let's try to erase as much of the Christian Western world baggage that we were born and raised in, and let's just look at what the sources and the evidence state. Now, I'm going to state a couple things that a lot of people don't believe. I get argued with all the time that the Germanic tribes are not the same, that each tribe was different. I absolutely disagree with that. Odin, whether he was called Woden in Saxony or Woden in England, whether he was called Odin in Iceland, Odin in Scandinavia, he has one eye in all of the areas that the Aesir were venerated. He had a spear. He had an 8-legged horse in all the areas that the Aesir were venerated. He had 2 ravens, 2 wolves. The folklore of Odin is extremely similar, if not the same, in all the areas that the Aesir were venerated. Where were the Aesir venerated? The Aesir were venerated by Germanic tribes. The Scandinavians are Germanic peoples. So the very north of Europe, as in Germany, from central Germany on up, the Netherlands, Belgium, a small area of France, but most of France is Roman, Celtic, Gaul. And then, of course, up through Denmark, into Scandinavia, and, of course, into Iceland. And, of course, there were some Germanic migrants to Britannia, which became Angleland, the land of the Angles. And the Angles are Germanic peoples. So, this is the area that the Aesir were venerated historically. And all these tribes had 2 seasons a year. They had winter and they had summer. And they had 3 major bloats a year, all of them. They had a bloat to start winter, a bloat for midwinter, and a bloat to end winter. Those are your 3 major bloats. Now, I'm going to talk about some local variances. And then we're going to ask, because of some local variances, does this mean that there was a kindred model in pre-Christian heathen times? So, there were 3 major bloats a year, as I said, and Odin established the same law in this land that had been enforced in Asgard or Asaland. On winter day, the first day of winter, there should be a bloat for a good year. The middle of winter, a bloat for a good crop, and the third bloat will be on summer day, a victory bloat. Ynglinga Saga chapter 8. Now, Iceland and Norway, they're very similar. Okay, they're much more similar. They're kind of like an island amongst themselves. And you have Denmark and Sweden, they're similar. Okay, most of the Icelanders came from Norway, and Iceland and Norway is very similar. I'm going to show saga references later that prove that Iceland and Norway had family bloats on the 3 major bloats a year. It was not a kindred. It was not a church. And they didn't meet in stave churches yet. Those are Christian influences. The sagas show bloats and symbols by families on the 3 major bloats a year. Now, Denmark and Sweden is a little different from Iceland and Norway. They have major cult gathering centers like Tisu, Lera, Uppsala. Okay? Now, the Danes and Swedes are also similar. Not only do they have cult centers, but only they did a bloat every 8 years, though today it's called the 9 years. The Christians tended to count the first number twice. That's why Sunday is called the 8th day in Christianity, Resurrection Day. So I did in another video prove that the 9-year bloat is actually every 8 years, but this is how the Christians and the Muslims wrote it down because they counted in the European manner of repeating the first number. Hence, Sunday is the 8th day when it occurs 1 out of every 7 days. But nonetheless, here's what the sources say in Sweden first, and then we'll get to Denmark. It is customary to gather in 9-year intervals at Uppsala, a general bloat of all provinces of Sweden. All Swedes must attend this feast. No one is exempted. This is what the historical sources tell us in 1073 AD. So the Swedes had a major cult center gathering, and I have no doubt that Swedes went as clans and families to the cult center. But these Swedes and Danes were far more. They were family first, but they were also kind of national. Hate to say it, but or hate to word it that way, I should say. There's nothing wrong with nations. I live in a nation myself, but you know, the best way to word it is they had a national or a huge tribal confederation. All the Swedes, they're groups of tribes into one group of people called Swedes. They go to Uppsala. That's their cult center. Now, the Chronic in Theotmar Mersberg, written around 1000 CE or AD, as I have heard stories concerning their ancient midwinter bloats, I will not allow this custom to be ignored. The middle of that kingdom is called Letteren, or Lera, in the region of Sealand. All the people gathered every 9 years in January, that is after we celebrated the birth of our Lord, and there they offered to their gods sacrifices. Now, I don't like the word sacrifice. I'm going to replace the word bloat because our decolonized Christian West mind, when we think of sacrifice, we think of the Bible and sacrifices in the Bible. An altar in a temple in Jerusalem and Christ being a sacrifice on a Christian cross. There's a difference between a sacrifice in my mind and a bloat. Bloat is sharing blood with the gods and having a meal, using the animal skins for clothing, the animal meat for food, and eating the food as a community, sharing the blood with the gods. That's why it's called bloat. So, but nonetheless, we have cult centers, Tisu and Lera in Denmark, and Uppsala in Sweden. So again, the Danes and the Swedes are far more cult center orientated than the Norwegians and the Icelanders, who are family and only family. So, and then of course, since this channel is about the reconstruction of all the Germanic tribal heathenries, but just a reminder, the Saxons actually were more like their Danish neighbors, and the Swedes, who are very close to each other. You know, Sweden is very close to Denmark. There's not much sea between Kattegat and or Kattegat is the area in northern Denmark. There's not much sea between Sealand and Sweden. But nonetheless, the Saxons had cult centers like the Irminsul and Dunar's Well. So again, as I stated before, the purpose of this video is to examine if the Kindred model is a church, synagogue, mosque-oriented monotheistic model, or is it a model based on solid research in the historical sources. Now, I believe kindred is a made-up word. Technically, it is a word in our English language, but in heathenry today, we have words like kin, which is a Germanic word. It's found in the Scandinavian languages and the Germanic languages because, hey, the Scandinavians are Germanic people. Kin is our word for family. Kind, K-I-N-D, is our word for offspring. So some argue kindred is a made-up word, but it has two Germanic words. Kin and kind is the roots of the words. Kin means family, And the word kin means child of the family or offspring of the family. Now, a church is a group of people who are not blood related, but they claim to be children of Abraham by adoption. Okay, that's how Christianity works. You have a personal relationship with Jesus, and you are a part of the greater Christian community or the church. Ecclesia is a word that means chosen people. The nation of Israel, of course, claims that it was chosen people. And the church says they're the new Israel, that God stopped loving the Jews first and foremost, and he replaced them with the church. So a church is a group of Gentiles who are not blood related, but they are adopted into a family. They are children of Abraham by adoption. And this is pretty much what a kindred is doing, just not in the name of Yahweh or Christ, using phrases like hey brother and hey sister and calling themselves a family. Heathen organizations and heathen kindreds are really heathen denominations and heathen churches, which are modern institutions foreign to historical heathenry. So what is the institution of historical heathenry? I believe it's the family and the clan. The clan can attend a tribal cult center for ritual, like in Sweden and Denmark. Now, kuni is the old Saxon word for kin or family. Okay, this is our blood family. Okay, we are related by offspring, our blood. And the word kin means offspring. And Old Saxon has another important word, sibia. Old English has sibba, and Old Norse is sibian in the singular, and sifjar, and excuse my pronunciation, in the plural. Thor's wife is named Sif and is related to this word sifjar and sibian. Okay, Sibia is a bigger unit comprising non-blood related people like a spouse or a spouse of a family member. So when you have in-laws, so to speak, that's a part of your Sibia, but not a part of your Kuni. So when Thor married Sib, she became a part of Thor's Sibia. Okay, because Sif is your Old Norse, Sib is your Old Saxon. In addition, Sibia includes your siblings' offspring. That siblings possessive. So you can see, oops, I did not mean to do that. Let me jump then, since I accidentally jumped to the next slide. But remember, our word siblings today in this language comes from this word. Sib is your wife, like it was Thor's wife. Sibia would be the two families that become joined through a marriage. And kun, or kuni, is your clan or your family. And kind is your offspring. Now, Old Saxon scholar Dr. Prisca Augustine of Berkeley states in her book, The Semiotics of Fate, Death, and the Soul in Germanic Culture, the Christianization of Old Saxon, on page 27. The human being exists and acts only as a member of the Sib, not as an independent individual. The importance of the Sib is reflected in manifold acts of vengeance in the old sagas and epics, where it is not the specific individual that is sought out for revenge, but any member of that Sib. The individual gains identity by belonging to the Sib. Everything on the outside is considered hostile. Not only is membership in the Sib the fundamental requirement for legitimate existence in Germanic society, but to be excluded from the Sib is the equivalent to death. The significance of the Sib as a source of protection, peace, and rightful existence transcends the visible world, and by a unifying principle, the Sib includes the dead and the unborn. So, in Christian thought, when someone dies, they're now in, the Christian paradise, which we call heaven today, which interestingly enough is actually a heathen concept. I'll get into that in my next video. But death does not remove any individuals from the Sib. So the Sib, the greater family, includes the dead and the unborn. So this is the core foundation of heathen society, the Kuni and the Sib, family and relationships between families and bearing of children to keep the family going. In Old Saxon society, it was taboo to fail to name a newborn child after a deceased family member. In the Old Saxon poem known as the Helliand in Fit 2, this was written around 830, the year 830, Elizabeth wants to name her child John, but the family members protested, saying no one before was so named in our noble family's clan. We should choose for him another need-gathering name. So in Old Saxon culture, it was not a proper custom to give a child any name the parents wanted. The child would be named after a past ancestor within the clan who no longer was living on Midyard. Now, I'm not saying that we should not form a local community or local communities. I'm encouraging us more to think about our pre-Christian roots. I founded a local community, and the one that I founded, we all do two rituals. One is individuals or individual families, because I have a lot of solo practitioners in my local community. But hey, I have a heathen wife, I have heathen children, even my heathen son has a heathen fiance. So I, in a sense, have now a sib through my son. So in our local community, in Aldsidu, Chicago area, we have our family, and our solo, if we're a solitary practitioner, we do that ritual first, and then on the closest weekend date to the actual bloat itself, because we do the actual date with our family, then on the closest weekend date, we then do it as a local community. And we consider that ritual a nice addition to our family ritual, and family and clan is first. So in a sense, we cover the Icelandic and the Norwegian, but we also common the Colt Center. So we schedule our home events on the historical holidays, the historical bloat day. But in addition, we do the group ritual. And we teach as part of our local community that home ritual and family ritual, the kuni and the sib, they are the most important rituals. So I believe that we live in a world that is very individual. We tend to have meals by ourselves now, not as families. I worked for a Japanese company about 20 years ago, and some of them literally drove home for lunch and had dinner with their spouses. I BS you not. They understood this, and they prioritized meals with the family. Most Americans today, very infrequently do they have a meal as a family. The personal relationship with Jesus model is definitely affecting heathenry. We have a bunch of online keyboard warriors who probably don't do any ritual even by themselves. But to build heathenry, we must build heathen families. And we're not accomplishing anything unless we have heathen grandchildren and heathen great-grandchildren. Because in a Germanic Scandinavian society, the family, the clan, the sib was the core and the foundation. And I understand that we want to form local communities today, that we do, because we would prefer, especially if people don't have a heathen spouse and heathen children and a heathen family, they want to have some group ritual. I get it. But these should be nice additions to our family-centered ritual. There were cult centers in Old Saxony, and I do not believe the Irminsul was at the Exterstein, where these pictures are myself. But there certainly were areas, sacred groves, where the Saxon clans, we have it in the sources in Scandinavia and the Germanic areas, have clans venerating their gods, the Germanic gods, in the sacred groves. V-E is your Icelandic Scandinavian word. UUIH is your Old Saxon word. Going out in the sacred groves, the holy areas in nature, the clans absolutely did their own family bloats, even more than just the three major bloats a year. I'm not saying there are more holidays. We have the three major bloats a year, where in a sense it was obligatory to do these bloats, but there's also free will bloats throughout the year. Whenever a family feels like recognizing and acknowledging the gods or the whites, the ancestors, they will go out and they will do it. So heathenry was family first, clan Sibia second. and tribe was third in historical heathen times. A careful reading of Ynglinga Saga implies that there were 3 major holy bloats a year held at Uppsala. Holy tides were family affairs done in sacred groves and in family homes. Not being Swedes at Uppsala, the Norwegians celebrated the first major bloat, Ynglinga Saga, Chapter 8, Winter Nights, as a family bloat. See Gisla Saga, Sir Sonar, Chapter 7, and Chapter 9 for 2 good examples, but there are many. And here is an aerial view of the actual Saxon Irminsul site, is naturally where Charlemagne built a church and a Christian graveyard there to desecrate the holy area. And you can see that this unusual kind of hilltop fortress was a great place to have a cult center. Many people believe this was Eresburg, and actually the Irminsul was here, where there's another Christian church. So some people that believe that the Irminsul was next to Eresburg believe it was there, but most believe it was here. So there's me by the Christian church, Christian graveyard. Now, obviously, these graves are more modern. In Germany, if the graves are no longer kept up and the family's not paying the dues to the church, they will literally come in and dig up the old grave, and the old will be removed and a new body will be placed there. It is the way it is. Here's a sign at the Irminsul site. Of course, it's in German. This site kind of implies that it's a giant tree. The Irminsul was a giant tree, not a giant godpole. And this is a separate site from the Egsternstein. And here are some. While they look small, there were old Saxon godpoles found at Warendorf, and they look more like that historically, but that's me by reconstruction of them. Here are 2 godpoles found in the Danish cult center of Tisu, and this is a reconstruction of the cult house. It was like a mini temple that these 2 godpoles were in Tisu. So that is the cult center in Denmark, where lots of archaeological excavations have been done. And there's, I now have a newer Irminsul that's 2 feet taller. This is a 9 foot tall Irminsul. Actually, it's 7 foot because it's 2 feet in the ground. But this is where my family and the local community, this is kind of my modernized hair. I guess it's stone, but, only the top is actually stone from the ground. The others I bought. But this is where these trees are much bigger now. That oak is like 3 times the size. That was a baby red oak when I made this. But nonetheless, I'm not against the Kindred model, but let's strive to make sure that our kindreds are not heathen churches. Let's build heathen families first and foremost, and think more like our pre-Christian roots. And hey, you can visit our blog at aldsidu.com/blog. Please like and subscribe. I'm going to be writing less blogs and making more YouTube videos going forward. So thank you so much.